And
That's-
just you is C688331.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
C101996.
so I think it's important that the people who are kind of looked at to be the standard bearer.
From the general Twitterati in terms of what we verify and how careful we are about what we put out there, but we can easily go too far to the other extreme, which is not participate and pretend there's not a conversation happening until we have independently verified it. And there's a happy medium there that I think is a very gray area, and I hope we can talk about some of that today in terms of saying, hey, we're hearing this is happening, we're checking into it, or so-and-so is reporting this, do you have any information, or, you know, we will get back to, you know, just being present and being a part of the conversation, because these days, if you're not using the internet effectively, as Gabe said, then you're nowhere and you might as well not exist. So,
you know, Twitter to me is, my livelihood is on the internet. Twitter, I put nothing on Twitter that people pay me to put on Power Mizzou. It is simply a very small window to, it's like the one bite appetizer to say, here, if you like this, come check out the rest of it. I have never broken news on Twitter. I have never put anything on Twitter that I ask people who subscribe to our site not to post anywhere else on the internet. It is simply a tool to get somebody interested in my business.
Well, I use Twitter mostly to link my content to, and that's really just to sort of take advantage of the short attention span culture of people who, it used to be that they read our stories in the newspaper. Then when we went online, they just read it online. Then when I started a blog, a lot of people just read the blog and they don't even realize I write stories that I think spend a lot more time on than the blog stuff. Now there's people out there who just read what I put on Twitter thinking that's what I do as a beat writer, and that's like Gabe said, such a small portion of our time that we spend on our job. So I think you got to have to kind of reach out to those people and throw some links on there to say, hey, this isn't just what we do. This is just, it's like kind of like a megaphone. It's like, hey, if you're not paying attention to what we really spend our time on, here's a way to find it. And you know, I think it's dangerous just to put little pieces of what you're doing on there without some kind of link, or without at least saying, hey, I'm going to have a story up really soon on this. Otherwise, you're just giving people a really small part of the story, and that's where things kind of get lost in translation, and that's where Twitter becomes your outlet when, as a reporter, you know, you work for somebody else. You have a bigger picture, you know, a bigger purpose, really, than just putting 140 character statements out there. So that's how I use it, much like Gabe does, because otherwise I think you're really just cheapening the whole job, the whole thing that we came to school here for, and the thing that we try to do in our industry, if we're just using it to as our avenue of information.
And I believe that Twitter may be one of the best tools to start teaching yourself to think about reporting all day. It is a simple way to constantly be in tune with your story. And when you are working for a traditional news outlet, you can forget that unless you have a required job. And I expect our reporters throughout the day to use Twitter to gather their information. It is highly useful during breaking news, because when I can get enough tweets with information, then we can put something on our website and I don't have to be interrupting the reporter doing their job, his or her job. It's been great for Painter's press conference, actually. We had enough live tweeting during the news conference. We put together a great article for our website 10 minutes after the event was over. I believe in reporting the news throughout the day for that tiny set of people in our market that do want news as throughout the day. But we do have the goal of web before on air and tweet before everything else. I know people in town who are total news heads that go, I love it, I always know what's going on in town thanks to that. Is it the right and the wrong? I think we have more purpose than the average newsroom to be tweeting throughout the day. We do have an organizational structure though. We have managers and editors that are watching every tweet for KOMU before it's put out. But every reporter has their name on it, so if they're tweeting poorly, it's their personal street cred that could look bad. So we do coach our reporters to not suck.
Yeah. One person doesn't impact what the entire media does, but like Jen was talking about, if Joe Smith, who is a sophomore who works the desk at KOMU, tweets something, That's KOMU's to own. Whether it's fair or not, it just is. I have a couple employees, I have subscribers that will retweet my things on Twitter. If that's out there, it's mine, regardless of whether that's fair or not. And I think that social media has completely blurred the line.
Conversations about what's happening in Libya, and Tunisia, and Egypt, and many other communities. And he is seriously finding it all and tweeting it out on his account. When he finds something that he can't confirm, he will often ask his followers, I have this, can someone help me confirm it? It could be 100% confirmed, but does anyone else know this is true? He's never used the 100%. I'm going to use this tip. Don't ever use 100% when you're talking about an unnamed source. Let's just use that as a lesson for all of us. But when he has information that sounds quite confirmed, he will say, I don't know this for sure, but I'd love to hear from other people. And I think his transparency has been fabulous and fascinating, and I applaud him for his amazing work and exhaustive effort.
The same on Twitter, your blog. I'm curious, and you talked about how you, especially in sports, you have to use sources. So if your standards are the same where you're using sources in your articles, you're using sources on your blog, what would be wrong with tweeting, my source is saying this on Twitter? Because you're saying you have to use sources to stay in the game. What would be wrong with that in your opinion?
For me personally, I like to give a little bit more content if you just can't do that on Twitter. And I think for me, it's dangerous. I don't like kind of doing the story in pieces. And I know that Jen talked about KOMU, that's okay. For me, I want to have it all together before I'm just giving out pieces. Because sometimes if it's something that's pretty newsy, you run the risk of scooping yourself by giving Gabe or giving his dad or giving Vahe something. I don't have a story yet, but I've got a little sliver of it on Twitter. I just like to be a little more thorough first. And if I have one source that tells me that, I put it out on Twitter. If I make 5 more phone calls, I might get 5 more sources that tell me that guy's full of crap. So you just have to know who you're dealing with. And I think it's really important to know the difference between a really good source and a guy who knows a really good source or might be next door neighbors to one. So that's all part of the learning process. That you just have to know who to trust.
If we're giving our viewers little nuggets throughout the day on all our stories, then what's the point in watching our newscast at the end of the day?
Stations need to get over the fact that if they think they're in the business of delivering television newscasts, they're going to die. You know, it's that kind of, no, I'm serious, because your audience wants to get what they want, when they want it, how they want it, and they don't want to wait for your program. And so if you think that your main program, now, how they get it though, I understand. So Gabe and Dave's, they both work for organizations that have paywalls, and so it makes the most sense for them to do their tweets accordingly because their monetization is coming from a different source. The access to KOMU's information, it may be old information by the time you get to your program. And I heard Dave talk about scooping himself. There are other ways to get your audience other than your main program, and so people are watching it. They're watching it on their mobile phones. They're getting it lots of different ways.